Even since before I started working on this project, I've been all too aware that the windows that we chose have an 8-week delivery lead time. This, on the face of it, seemed like it was going to be the slowest part of this project, so I was quite keen to get the window apertures prepared so we could get the windows measured up and ordered. Preparing the window apertures meant boxing out the steel columns that sat underneath the roof. Still worrying about cold bridges, I did this with a couple of 2x2s, so the screws that screwed into the metal wouldn't be anywhere near the outside face of the building. I quickly discovered an ongoing annoyance, which is that for some reason construction timber, while being sold as 150 by 50mm, actually comes out more like 145 by 45mm. This wouldn't be such a problem if the rest of the construction industry actually obeyed its metric measurements. So for example, the insulation I needed to put around these columns was 100mm wide, but 2 sets of 2x2s were only 90mm. I ended up making it up with a bit of plywood, which worked just fine, but I just don't understand why it needs to be that way. I grew to really hate these self-tapping screws, particularly when trying to screw pieces of wood onto them blind, because I just couldn't see whether I was making progress or not. I ended up giving in and buying myself an impact driver, which is the thing I'd been resisting, as I never really saw the point in them and just thought they were excessively noisy. But they did help because they applied so much torque to inserting these screws, and it allowed me to get the job done eventually. Once I got the 2x2s fixed down, I could then fill the gap with the insulation, which was no problem at all, and I actually had some left over from when we fitted out Lily's bakery a few years ago. And then per the plans, I needed to box them out with a bit more plywood. We didn't really have a plan for how we were going to finish these columns yet. One of the options was to do them in zinc like the roof, another option was to maybe do them to match the windows that were going in. And the crazy idea that I put forward to Lily, but she wasn't too interested in, was that we could paint them something interesting, because I am an artist after all. So to keep my options open, I decided I would do as nice a job as I possibly could in boxing them out. This meant rather than doing just a simple butt joint on the corner, I'd actually bother to mitre them, which was a bit of a silly idea. I thought, oh yeah, no problem, I'll just set the mitre angle on my table saw and run the timber through. And on my first cut, the timber really bound on the riving knife, because there was just so much tension in the wood. This also came back to bite me when I was trying to assemble it as well, because the two pieces were now flexing in complete opposite directions. This meant that as well as glue, I had to do some awkward clamping, and then I very meticulously nailed the two edges of the mitre together as well to make as clean a joint as possible. It took a little bit of tweaking to get it to the right size, but I always follow Frank Howarth's advice and make it a little bit too big and then try and creep up on the right size, because it's better to be too big and easy to cut down a little bit than to be too small. I repeated this all over again with the other column on the front of the sunroom, and this one was a bit trickier because I had the brick column to work around as well. I had to take some vague measurements and then try and scribe against it, and then randomly the tool I found most useful for just nibbling a little bit off to try and get the scribe right was actually my angle grinder with a flap disc, which was maybe a bit unconventional. Dutch angles aside, I did manage to get it installed, and it really started to transform the structure as I could start seeing how big these columns were actually going to be. Once they were done, and the ones on the back wall, which were significantly easier, were done, I also got the boxing out done on the top edges, which was a little bit unconventional as well. I wasn't too confident in this, but I spoke to the building controller about it when he was over, and he seemed happy with what I was doing because he pointed out that nothing's actually going to deflect on top of this glass because there's all that steel frame, and my timber that I was putting in was literally just there to hold the glass in the right place. Somehow, even with measuring it and trying to sneak up on the fit, I ended up with a few millimeters at the top of the gable not quite matching up. But I thought actually this could work in my favour, and I got another little shim of plywood which I hammered in, effectively like a keystone. Disappointingly, it still took a few weeks of bureaucracy, both on our part and the window company's part, to get them to finally come out and measure the project. But they did, and we eventually got the windows ordered. Time for the long wait. With all of my rafters up and in place, I had originally thought my next step would be to put the first deck of plywood up, but having thought about it, I realised I should probably start getting the insulation between the rafters first, as that would be easier fitted from above than below. I placed the order for the insulation that I needed, and despite the website I ordered from saying, oh, it'll take 2 to 3 days, I ended up having a massive wild goose chase with delivery, and it ended up taking more than 2 weeks to arrive, which was really frustrating. Before I could get the insulation up, I had one more job that I had to take care of that I was really not looking forward to doing. And that... Alright, jackdaws. And that was chiselling off some of the pebble dashing above this structure's roof, because the insulation and my roof build out needed to go up against it, and there needed to be some room for the flashing. I used a scrap of timber and a chalk pen to mark out how far I needed to cut. And then I got the hammer drill out and tediously worked through it, not realising that it was going to be much easier in one direction than the other on account of the slope and me being left-handed. In the meantime then, I realised the other job that I could do, particularly now I'd cut those steel fins off, was to work on the hidden gutters that are going to be on either side of this building. This meant that I had to notch out a section of the rafters, each one being a little bit different, to allow the gutter to have at least the minimum fall as specified by building regulations. So I cut more 6x2 offcuts down to fit between each one of these rafters in the right position, and that gave me something to notch around. I also made these plates where I marked out the build out of the roof and its final thickness and all the pieces that needed to attach to it, which I then screwed to the wall before I put in the last piece of timber that supported the gutter. I ended up using my e-chisel to cut these notches, as it seemed pretty efficient, and it was, except for the fact that I kept running into screws in my shoddy carpentry work, which was really frustrating and blunted a couple of blades unnecessarily. It looked pretty convincing though, and so I was quite happy with the job that I'd done on it, and was getting closer to starting to fit out some of this insulation. The other thing to prepare the way for these gutter boxes that I needed to do was to attach the trimmer boards to the ends of the rafters. I was kind of surprised that I managed to get this first one up by myself, because these 4.8 metre long 2x6s are surprisingly heavy. I think I used some ropes, and I was smart enough to not record it in case I did something absolutely awful. Every time I walked down to the workshop, I noticed how warped it was, because it turns out that one of the steel cantilevers that was welded in place on site was actually incredibly wonky. I was really unsatisfied with this and decided that I had to address it, so I marked up where the steel fin was that was pushing it out so much. And then this time I got Lily to help me lift it down.
How did you get it up?
The way I'm trying to take it down. I decided that cutting the wood would be easier than the steel, so I routed out a channel in the timber in the shape of the I-beam for it to slot into and hopefully straighten up a bit. And I also took the opportunity to cut the piece of timber down to its final length as well. Then Lily helped me lift it back up, and I screwed it back together, and it was a great improvement, so that was worth doing. Gladly I didn't have to go through that on the other side though. At the end of the last video, I got all the rafters up and I really felt like the roof was flying. But I guess I kind of underestimated how much other work there was to do in building this structure out. Gladly it's all been in timber, which I'm much happier working in than some of the other stuff that I've had to do on this project. But these hidden gutters in particular are requiring lots of work and lots of stuff that I still haven't figured out about them, and I'm going to have to figure out sooner or later. I'll start getting some insulation in the next video, and that'll be really good, as it will suddenly make the roof solid and no longer just a massive skeleton. So thanks for watching along with this still, and keep it real.